Welcome everyone to GW4W's Wine and Tea Wednesdays. I'm Mim Senft, CEO and co-founder of GW4W. We hope you have a beverage, take a deep breath, relax, and join us for another really fun, inspiring conversation. I am delighted that Monique Jefferson is our guest today. She is the Chief Human Resources Officer at New York Public Radio. She has over 20 years of diverse global experience in the financial services, legal, insurance, and professional services industries, and she's led both regional and global teams. She holds a master's degree in HR resource management and certifications through both SHRM, which I know many of us are familiar with, and the HR Certification Institute. She's also a board member for Caliber Global Leadership Network. I hope I have the pronunciation correct. They're a leadership and professional development organization and network dedicated to accelerating the careers of mid to senior level African-American executives. Welcome, Monique. We are delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and enjoy this lunchtime conversation with everyone.
Great. Well, we're going to jump in. You've been an HR leader, as we shared, for most of your career. A lot of things are going on. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen in HR over the past 10 years?
Yeah, so when I really take a step back and really think about it, I think it really kind of falls under the area of transformation, like HR transformation around people, process, and systems. So let me break that down a little bit and explain what I mean by that. So first and foremost, skills. So the skill sets and competencies that are required today or in demand are not what was required 10, 15, even 20 years ago. They didn't exist. We've also seen an evolution, particularly within HR, we've seen an evolution in roles. So for example, years ago it was HR generalist. Now they've kind of evolved to an HR business partner to reflect being more strategic and really more of an advisor to senior leaders. We've also seen a transition of human resources, or calling CHRO, and now you're starting to hear and see more around chief people officers. And I think that's again to reflect the evolution or the importance around people resource. Our people resources are truly the most important, and it's an organization's greatest asset. And so instead of calling it just HR, which for some it's more operational, more administrative focus, but really rebranding and moving to people, the people department or the people team, and being a chief people officer really, I think, acknowledges that it's more strategic, it's more client focused, and it's better aligned and closer to the business. Also seeing changes around operating models or service delivery models in terms of how specifically the HR function supports leaders and delivers services to an organization. So you'll hear more around over the past 10 years around shared service and how HR is a shared service and those type of operating models that we put in place. And then there's also, of course, first and foremost, I probably should have said this first, there is more of a leverage on technology, like machine learning and AI, particularly within the talent acquisition space. I mean, like talent acquisition has just been transformed and turned upside down on its head. I can even remember as much as like maybe 15, even 10 years ago, 12, 15 years ago, do you remember people still used to go to the paper and look for jobs, or there were more paper applications. So, you could still be emailed to you, but you would still fill out more of a traditional application versus going online, going into a portal, applying. You have through technology, they're doing more of the screening, keyword searches to try to narrow down the pool of applicants for the recruiter that they can then go in and start the review. So there's definitely been more of a leverage and emphasis put on technology, and then also from a operational or self-service delivery model internally for your employees. So years ago, you would call your HR person and say, I've moved. I need to change my address, or I want to change my benefits, or I want to, do this, do that. Now you can do it electronically and through the use of like chat bots and very interactive technology. You can still get your transactions processed without necessarily having to deal with, an HR person, if you will. But that person then has the capacity to work on more strategic issues, be more client focused, and really be available to able to support the leaders within the organization. And then lastly, and of course, I can't leave this off, in the area of mental health and wellness. 10 years ago, we were not talking about, and there was not a focus around an employee's mental health. It just didn't happen. You had your traditional health and wellness and benefits, benefits coverage. But I mean, particularly in the past, like 2-3 years, and even now with the pandemic, there is a significant focus on an employee's mental health and well-being. And I think it is organizations now have to be held more accountable because employees are expecting more. So.
Yeah, great. I mean, just so many wonderful pieces of the puzzle that have shifted. I mean, I love this idea of chief people officer as opposed to human capital. That's just my own personal preference, where I think of it as just this, it brings a more human descriptor around what it is. And I think it's interesting too, this increase in technology in like every aspect of business now, but particularly when we're talking about these interactions. And so it's this balancing, between high tech, high touch. How do we, keep connected to people? But mental health and well-being, particularly for us at GW4W, this has been core to what we've been talking about for years now, and it has been underscored. I mean, how can our people show up if their mental health and well-being, their connection to purpose, and understanding all these underlying issues aren't addressed in more meaningful ways? And I think, particularly when we look at this through a diversity lens. So, we know statistically there are just a small number of Black chief HR officers currently in the US. What has your experience been as a female leader and a woman of color? And how does this kind of play into the discussion that's happened over the past year?
Yeah, so, we knew, when I really reflected and thought about this question, the first thing that popped into my head is the intersectionality elements of it. So, it's not just I'm Black, or it's not just I'm a woman, but I'm a Black woman. And those each bring different things, right? And so when I really think about that, often I've been in situations in rooms where I'm the only one, but more so the only one of color versus being the only woman. More often than not, there's usually maybe 1-2 other women in the room, but they tend to be white women. So more often than not, I'm the only one in the room that is of color. And because of that, you feel that you are under a microscope, or that you're watched. And then at times, the perception anyway, is that you're held to a different standard. And so being the only woman of color, you carry this weight of the other diverse people in the organization, because you know that they're looking towards you, and you want to make sure that you don't screw this up, you don't, mess it up, right? That you do a good job, that you're reflective of, other women or other people of color. And so you can wind up feeling lonely, scared, all at the same time. Lonely in that, sometimes when you get to those rooms or you get to those levels, you're the only one. You're scared because, again, it goes back to, I'm here now and I can't mess this up, right? So, what does this mean for everyone else? Also, it can be exhausting at times. Like, I know, not just because of the pandemic or because of the social injustices, but there are a lot of women, and also women of color, that are just downright exhausted, right? And I think part of it is because we're oversubscribed. You have so few women, and also women of color, that are in senior roles, so that they often are the ones that I call them usual suspects. You're constantly because there's so few of them, you're constantly calling on the same individuals to be mentors to other women and people of color, to serve on panels, to speak, to be the sponsor of an ERG. And it's almost like they become the poster child. So while organizations have good intentions, the flip of that is that they're exhausted. So it's like you're lonely, you're scary, and then you're exhausted all at the same time. And so trying to manage that, yeah.
Yeah. So have you seen anybody out there moving in a better direction that's like intentionally addressed some of this?
So just in general right now, particularly over the past like 6 to 12 months, I just think not, again, women, but also women of color, the numbers are increasing. And what I'm trying to understand is that are the numbers truly going up and there's more representation, whether it's, you know, in the CHRO or that chief people officer role, or in just across all the functions, you're seeing more people of color and women in these senior roles. What I'm trying to figure out, is it the numbers going up, or is it just a game of musical chairs? Because of what's happening, a lot of organizations are like, okay, we need to have more representation in the C-suite. We need to have more representation on our board. So they're going out and trying to, you know, increase the representation and get that talent. But then it's like, okay, so you've seen a lot of movement and activity in the workforce right now at those senior levels. For example, Roz Brewer now is the second woman. And then we have the young lady from Chase, Tasunda, hopefully I'm saying her name correctly. She's moving to become the CEO of TIAA. Now it's the third woman. And I am just so proud and just, you know, enthusiastic and excited to see this, of what's to come and to see the change. But then I often stop and ask myself, is it just a reshuffle of the deck, or are we really seeing an increase in numbers?
Right.
So.
No, I think that's spot on. I mean, I think it's interesting when we look at like the CEOs, Fortune 500, and you know, have the numbers increased for female CEOs, and now a few Black female CEOs, a little. But you know, if you compare that to any other business initiative, where we see like what 0.8% increase, is that?
Yeah, it's minimal.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that something that we all stand up and cheer? Like if we just got a 0.8% increase in our profit margin, as an example, would we as business leaders
No.
be, yeah, of course not, right? So why are we, right? So I think I really appreciate that you pointed this out. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, too, the interim CEO at Bed Bath & Beyond is also a Black female leader.
Yes, she is.
That stepped
But
in.
you know, people are quick to point out, like, we want to be happy and celebrate that. I find sometimes that people are quick to point out it's interim. It's almost like they're waiting, like they're expecting it not to, you know, change, or it's like they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it's like, look, interim or not, it still should be recognized, and it's a step in the right direction. And it's
100%. You know, you're spot on. And that is funny, because when I saw that announcement, that's exactly, I'm going, why is it just interim? That was exactly my thought. I'm like, why wouldn't she just be put into this? But,
right. And again, you know, listen, I'm sure there is you know, information and stuff that we're not privy to and we don't know.
Right.
But, you know, look, interim or not, it's still a step in the right direction and something that should be recognized and celebrated. I'm here for all of it. So
every win, every win, every win. Yep.
Right.
I absolutely agree with that. So I think it's really interesting too. You know, you recently joined the team at New York Public Radio. And what you shared with me is really extraordinary. You have a truly diverse leadership team. Wasn't always the case. So what led to that change there, and how do you perceive this as impacting the overall work culture?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I subscribe to, I feel very strongly that if you are going to change culture, it has to start at the top. And the change that has occurred here and is still continuing to change at New York Public Radio is being driven by our CEO, female CEO. She has been very intentional in building the diverse team that, you know, she has around her. And I was the last piece of that puzzle. I was the last hire of the senior leadership team here. And so she's been very intentional in doing that. We recognize that we have to do a better job and strive to create an equitable and a very inclusive culture, because that always was not the case here. And so the impact this new leadership team is having on culture is that we now have diverse perspectives and diverse thoughts around the table that are there making the decisions. And so when you have that, a diverse team, that then leads to better outcomes and more innovative results, which also will help us drive the future growth for the organization. We've set very aggressive goals and targets for our leadership team, particularly in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've communicated that out to us, to our workforce. And so as part of doing that, that's how we hold ourselves accountable, by being more transparent and putting that out there, acknowledging and recognizing, hey, we know we're not where we need to be. We know, we haven't gotten it right. We're not doing it right, but now we're committed, and this is what we're going to be committed to. We're very clear on our 19-point plan, which will be made public very shortly on our website.
Yay.
But that's how we're going to begin to hold ourselves accountable. So the other impact that I think it's having is that, particularly on our BIPOC employee population, now they look at the senior leadership team and they see individuals that look like them. So, which I think is very impactful and goes a long way. We're also beginning to challenge some of our operating norms. And so, for example, we're looking at our editorial process, our pitch process, to ensure that it's inclusive and it's equitable and that all voices are being heard and that everyone has an opportunity to present their ideas.
That's really exciting. And I know that, we talk a lot about like all the areas of diversity, ageism, and like English as a second language, socioeconomic differences, some of these things that sometimes I think other organizations, and what an extraordinary opportunity, because New York Public Radio, what a big voice you have, right? So not only are you going to be able to like put out this programming, but you're walking the talk. And so the thought popped up in my mind when you interviewed with the CEO, what was it that made you go, this is the group I want to be a part of?
Yeah, I mean, she was honest. She was honest and she was transparent around providing the historical perspective and some of the challenges, that has occurred specifically for New York Public Radio, starting in 2017. Internally in the organization, they referred to that time period as the Troubles, because there was a lot of turmoil that the organization was dealing with. There were high-profile exits, and a lot of it was coming out of, it initially started with the Me Too movement, and some of the instances that was happening internally that the leadership at the time just was not made aware of. And then when this happened externally, it's like, well, hey, we had people raise their hands saying some of that is going on here. And, hey, leaders, you need to start doing something about it. So she was very transparent and honest about that. And she was committed to, and she talked about how this is why I came here. This is what my vision is. This is what I'm trying to do. This is a very mission-driven organization, and a lot of people. We have a lot of long service, employees, and they stay not necessarily because of the money. I mean, we're not for profit. Let's be honest, right? People are staying here because they are very committed to the work that we do and the way that we serve our community, the New York City community. And so we recognize that our programming, our journalism, our workforce needs to be reflective of that population that we operate in. So given that she was intentional, she was honest, she was transparent, she laid out her vision, and I was hooked. I was brought in, and I said, I want to be a part of that. So that's what did it for me. And then as I continued to go through the interview process and I met with the other leaders and heard their stories and their experiences and why they came here, and them coming from a similar corporate background to myself, that also reinforced it, like, okay, at this point in my career, this is the right next step for me. This is what I want to do, and I want to be a part of this.
Wow.
There's not too many times in your career where you have an opportunity to really impact and drive change and making a reasonable, a meaningful difference, so that, years later you can look back and say, I did that, or I was a part of doing that. And so that's the feeling that I have in coming and joining New York Public Radio.
Very, very inspiring. And I think this whole discussion around leadership, transparency, call it what it is. Here's how we're going to try and rebuild this. How deeply does that connect you to a sense of purpose?
Absolutely.
And, I really can't wait to see what you guys do. And and again, we always call out, like, there are a lot of discussion about how you're going to have diverse leadership and how you're going to do this. This is exactly what needs to happen. You need the leadership that has the commitment and goes out and makes those changes. It doesn't need to take 10 years.
It doesn't. And also too, one of the things that struck me, and I've told my CEO this, is that, some organizations are all about talk, but not very few of them have the actions to follow up. Whereas she was the opposite, because when I was meeting with her and she was telling me all these wonderful things that they're doing and how she's built the team and what their plans are, I'm like, why is this not being communicated? Why is not, why aren't we telling our story and putting this out there more? And she's like, listen, let's talk more action. I think people will know and learn and understand and realize that when they see how committed we are, and when they see our actions. I'm less concerned about, putting out statements and talking about it and putting it out there. Yes, we want to do that, but that's not what we lead with. That's not what's important. What's important is the action, making sure that it's sustainable. It's a sustainable action.
Yeah, and I think, 100% sustainable. How do we make sure that this isn't just another lunch and learn, another short training that, hey, we did it, check the box, but truly inspiring. And I love that you guys are going to publicly share your 19-point plan. Please let us have that. We are happy to put it out.
It'll be on our website.
Okay, well, we're going to keep an eye out for that because it really, again, it gets, because that's the next question, right? For organizations to say, okay, we want to do this. Like, are there examples of places and what are they committing to? And how does that align with us? It is helpful. It doesn't mean that your organization is going to do it exactly the same. They're different cultures, but I do think it helps push the envelope in general in industry when there are these market leaders. You guys, we hold up Nest UK all the time over in London, because when it comes to gender and D&I, they've done an amazing job. So that brings us to the next question. Obviously, as we heard at the beginning, you've worked in wide variety of industries, which gives you a really unique perspective. Is there one major issue that you consistently have seen that you think continues to get overlooked when we talk about employee engagement?
Yeah, I think there were actually two that come to mind. One is, I think organizations at times overlook employee recognition and are not willing to meet employees where they're at in terms of making them feel, and also making them feel supported, which looks different for each employee. In the area of recognition, I think what happens is that employers try to do one size fits all. You can't do one size fits all type of employee recognition, because what works for one person, they might like the public recognition, someone else that might make them feel very uncomfortable, and you will have the opposite effect. Like, they don't want that, right? They still want to be recognized and rewarded, but doing it, publicly may not work for them, whereas for others, that might be the case. So I think employers really need to look at the recognition piece and really try to meet people where they're at and use that as a powerful tool to increase levels of engagement and make sure that it's differentiated. I also think they need to train managers. Like, we talk about employee engagement, put so much focus on employee engagement, but I think sometimes what we forget is that our managers, they want to help, they have the best intentions, but they don't know what to do. Yeah. And they need to be trained, provided with tools and resources to say, this is what it looks like when your employees are engaged. This is how you should be behaving as a manager. Here are some of the things that you need to proactively do, which will drive levels of engagement in your organization.
Yeah, we could not agree with you more. It is interesting that the number one reason that people leave organizations is because of their manager. It's not the pay, it's not the benefits, not that those things aren't important, but spot on. I think if there was more focus on how, particularly emerging your newer managers, and we're a lot about put your own mask on first.
Yeah.
So how do you want to visibly lead? Where is your emotional intelligence level? And again, it's not about finger pointing. It's more about curiosity. Where am I with this? Cultural intelligence, I think, is something that, for managers,
particularly in this time.
Yeah.
Cultural intelligence or cultural IQ is huge.
Huge.
They want to help, but it's hard because we're quick. Sometimes employees are quick to blame.
Right.
Or we're quick to point out what's wrong, but managers are like, listen, I want to do this, I want to help, but I just don't know how to. I need some support. Right. I need some tools. Then once you provide that, then you can hold them accountable. Right. But it's hard to hold somebody accountable to something that you haven't, trained them, informed them on. 100%. Right. So
yeah, we always use the analogy around like an elite athlete. Like you could be a star player, you're emerging, you're doing this, but every great elite athlete has coaches. Every single one. in any of your, doesn't matter, football, basketball, go down the list, right? So they know what they're really, really good in, but they're also honest about, well, here's where I want to improve, or here's what I don't know. And having those coaches surround you, and you may need different training, different coaches at different points in your career, but I couldn't agree more. And I think, particularly now, goes back to what you said about mental health and well-being. Grief and mourning, actual PTSD for some of your employees that are coming back into the workforce after what we've been through over the past 12 months. And these are uncomfortable things. Like, as a manager, you may be the great sales manager it's ever been, but having some acknowledgement of how some of these things are going to show up, particularly now, what a gift to your organization, the trust you can build with your team.
Yes.
It goes back to that. How connected are you to the purpose of your organization? If you can recognize where that person comes in, that diversity, like you said, not one size fits all.
Right. You got to differentiate recognition, but then you also have to recognize and understand that we need to meet people where they're at. And in order for people to show up as their best selves at work, we have to make sure that they feel supported. And that's going to look like, that's going to look different for different people on your team. So supporting managers and training managers so that they can recognize that and be differentiated and do that is important. It's key.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Well, these always go so fast, and this is just such an important conversation. There are lots of people out there, and lots of women and men in our network that would love to hear some words of wisdom from you around what do you think they should be doing? What skills should they be acquiring? What's going to make them more effective as they move into senior HR positions?
So I will just pivot a bit, not to focus necessarily on skills, because the skills, you can always go out and get skills training. I would say, if I had to boil it down to a key message, I would say, and in this, again, this is from my own experience, I learned I wish I had learned this and realized this lesson earlier on in my career. Be your authentic self. Try to align early on in your career, try to align your passion and your purpose with your profession. Be clear on who you are and what drives and motivates you, and understand the type of environment or culture you need to thrive. So if you can get that right and figure that out and become self-aware early on in your career, then you can ensure that regardless of where you work and in the culture of that organization, you will show up as your best self, and you'll be able to bring your full self to work. So that would be the one, piece of advice that I would give to everybody is really, just be your authentic self, be true to yourself, really understand who you are, what motivates you, what you like, what you don't like, and really try to align your purpose and your passion with your profession.
Well said. Well said. So hopefully our next generation of leaders can take that to heart. And frankly, it's just good advice no matter where you are in your career.
Yes.
Doing that.
I feel like now that was part of my, reason for landing here, is that I feel like this particular role encompasses all of that at this point in my career. I'm taking my passion and my purpose, and it's aligned to my profession. So.
Wow. It's just great. And I think, again, it shows what's possible, because so many people think, what if I stay in this position? Should I take that leap of faith? Should I, do this? But I thank you so much for being a visible role model around this and just sharing your own journey with everybody today. We could talk for another half hour, I'm sure. But we want to give everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our discussion today. And thank you to you and to GW4W for all the work that you do and the impact that you are having on our community.
Well, thank you. It really is about more good together, and how we get the stories, the inspiration, and the connection going so that we can really accelerate positive change for all of us. Again, our mission is empowering more healthy female leadership at all levels so that we can have a more sustainable world. So with that, we just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please add your comments in the chat. Even if you're watching the recording, we always love to hear your feedback. And we ask you to connect with us at gw4w.org. And please remember that great minds sip together. We'll see you next week.